This Easter, as the world celebrates resurrection, we're pausing to ask, what's been buried under the weight of the cross? What does the cross mean to you? For some, it's a beacon of hope and a symbol of love and sacrifice. But for others, it's something heavier, a reminder of control, shame, and even trauma. Welcome to My Irreligious Life, where we dive deep into the intersections of faith, culture, and healing. And I'm your host, Jermaine Thomas, aka The Professor, but today, your bishop. In today's episode, the cause of the cross is one that is closest to my heart. Growing up, I was conditioned to see the cross as a symbol of hope, redemption, salvation, and healing. As a Christian, it was staple to the expression of my faith. Jesus died for my sins and all. But the more I learned, the more I saw another side. A Christianity shaped by rigid fundamentalism and a colonial past that demanded obedience over freedom. These forces, fundamentalist Christianity and historically colonized Christianity, have woven together to create high demand religions that can leave deep psychological and social scars, from fear of eternal punishment to the erasing of entire cultures. The cost of this cross is steep and too often is carried by those already on the margins of our society. In this episode, we are unpacking the cost of the cross. We'll trace the historical roots of these harms, explore the psychological toll of high demand religion, think anxiety, shame, or fractured families, and examine how these systems ripple out to divide societies. More importantly, most importantly, we'll raise awareness about religious trauma and share paths toward healing because faith shouldn't come at the expense of your freedom or your humanity. So, whether you're deconstructing your faith, supporting someone who is, or just curious about the shadows cast by the cross, this episode is for you. Walk with us as we confront hard truths, honor real stories, and imagine a spirituality that liberates instead of confines. To understand the cost of the cross, we need to start with its roots. Two forces have shaped what we commonly call Western Christianity today, which has hurt so many: fundamental Christianity and colonized Christianity. Fundamentalist Christianity emerged in the 19th and 20th centuries, a reaction to a world that was changing fast. Think of Darwin's theory on evolution, secular science, and even women's rights. Fundamentalists doubled down on a literal reading of the Bible, insisting on the inerrant word of God. Questioning wasn't just discouraged, it was sinful. This created a world of black and white thinking. You're either saved or damned, obedient or rebellious. Churches became a fortress of these ideas of certainty, led by leaders who demanded total loyalty. Sounds familiar? Because this is the blueprint for what we now call high demand religion. Now, family, let's look at colonized Christianity. When European power spread across the globe, think the Spanish in the Americas or the British in Africa, they didn't just bring swords and ships, they brought the cross. Missionaries and colonizers worked hand in hand, forcing conversion, burning indigenous scarce sites, and using Bible verses to justify slavery and land theft. In the Americas, Native children were wiped from their families, sent to Christian boarding schools to kill the Indian and save the man. And entire spiritual traditions were labeled demonic. The message was clear: to be Christian was to be civilized, and to resist was to be erased. These two forces, fundamentalism, rigidness, and colonial oppression, merged. The certainty of one true faith justified cultural destruction then, and it still does today. Think of modern missionaries pressuring indigenous communities to abandon their traditions, or prosperity gospel preachers exploiting poor congregations with divine promises of wealth. The cross became a tool not just of salvation, but of control. The, this history isn't just in the past, family. It's in the DNA of high demand religion today. And that's where the real harm begins, like the psychosocial harm of high demand religion. High demand religion is a term you may not hear every day, but if you lived it, you know the feeling. It's a system that controls every part of you, your thoughts, your behavior, and even your relationships. Fundamentalists and colonized Christianity often fits into this mold, and the damage they cause is profound. Let's start with the psychological toll. Imagine growing up believing one wrong thought can send you to eternal torture. That's not just fear, it's trauma. Studies like those by psychologist Marilyn Winall show that people raised in high demand faiths often struggle with anxiety, depression, or something called scrupulosity, a kind of religious OCD where you obsess over being good enough for God. There are stories of teenagers lying awake at night, terrified they've committed an unforgettable sin. And I will argue some adults too. I used to be one of those. And that's not peace, family. That's torment. Then there's identity. In these systems, you're not allowed to be fully human. Women are told to submit. Queer people are called abominations. And questioning the pastor is rebellion. Purity culture, for example, shames natural desires, leaving people with that guilt, especially women with that guilt that can last a lifetime. I read about women who spent years in therapy unlearning the idea that her body was sin. I know of someone personally who was forced as a kid to read the book of Leviticus every night to get rid of their gay deed. And we're talking about a 9 and 10-year-old, y'all. That's what happens when faith demands you erase who you are. The social harms is just as devastating. High demand religions thrive on control, and one way they enforce it is through exclusion. If you doubt, you're shunned. If you leave, you're cut off. Families break apart, parents disowning kids for coming out, or siblings refusing to speak because one stopped attending church. In colonized communities, the harm runs deeper. Indigenous practices like smudging or ancestral rituals are still demonized by some churches, forcing people to choose between their heritage and their faith. And let's share a story and example of this reality. A young man grows up in a fundamentalist church and taught that his same sex attraction is a sin. He prays years to be fixed, but nothing changes. When he finally comes out, his church excommunicates him. His parents stop talking to him. And he's left with no community, no family, and a voice in his head saying he's unworthy of love. That's the cost of the cross for him, and he's not alone. The psychological scars, fear, shame, and suppressed identity, and the social wounds, broken families, erased cultures are very real. But the harms doesn't stop with individuals. It ripples out to society. And let's explore that next. When we talk about the cause of the cross, it's not just personal, it's societal, y'all. Fundamentalists and colonized Christianity don't just shape individuals, they have shaped the world we live in, often in ways that divide and oppress. And let's start with the polarization, for example. Fundamentalist Christianity thrives on the us versus them thinking. We see it in the culture wars, anti science movements, rejecting vaccines or climate change, or crusades against reproductive rights and the LGBTQ plus equality. In the US, the mindset has fueled political extremism, with some churches preaching that only their version of Christianity can save this nation. And that's not unity, it's division. Then there's inequality. These systems often reinforce patriarchal, heteronormative, and Eurocentric norms. Women are told their place is in the home, queer people are marginalized, and non Western cultures are seen as the lesser. The prosperity gospel, rooted in colonized Christianity, preys on the vulnerable communities, promising miracles if you just give your last dollar to the church. I've seen mega churches in poor neighborhoods where pastors drive luxury cars, where congregants struggle to eat. That's not faith, it's exploitation. Globally, the legacy of Christianity lingers. Missionaries still push westernized faith into indigenous communities, often undermining local cultures. In some post colonial nations, rigid Christian doctrines block progress, like laws criminalizing same sex relationships, rooted in colonial era missions. The cross, meant to symbolize liberation, becomes a barrier to justice. So here's a question: what does it mean when a faith meant to unite us drives us apart, y'all? When it justifies inequality and erases entire ways of life? The cost to society is clear: division, oppression, and a world less free. But there is hope, and we can change this. And that's the heart of my message today. Let me share some thoughts on how the harms we talked about, psychological trauma, social division, cultural erasing, are heavy, but naming them is the first step to healing. Raising awareness about high demand religion and its roots in fundamentalist and colonized Christianity is how we starting to lighten the load of the cross. If you live this or know someone who has, look for the signs: fear-based control, suppressed questioning, and communities that shun dissent. Awareness means trusting your doubts. It means knowing it's okay to say, hey, that doesn't feel right. For those carrying religious trauma, healing is possible. Therapists who specialize in religious trauma, like those at the Religious Trauma Institute, can help. Groups like Recovering from Religion offer support for rebuilding your life. You're not alone and you're not broken. We can also reimagine faith. Christianity doesn't have to be oppressive. Movements like liberation theology show us a faith that fights for the marginalized and not against them. Progressive churches are creating spaces, in what I call safe spaces, where questions are welcomed and love doesn't come with conditions. And for those in colonized communities, reclaiming indigenous spirituality, whether alongside or instead of Christianity, can be a powerful act of resistance. So, what can we do? We can educate others about religious trauma. We can support policies that protect people from coercion, like laws that was against conversion therapy. Amplify verse, Amplify voices from communities healing from colonial Christianity. And most of all, listen. Listen to your own heart and to those who have paid the cost of the cross. Change starts with us, with conversations like this one. Together, we can build a world where spirituality lifts up and not hold us down. The cross stands as a symbol of sacrifice, but far too many, it's carried the weight of shame, control, and erased identities. This Easter, let's commit to lightening the load by questioning dogma, healing from trauma, and embracing a spirituality that frees rather than confines. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Let's keep the conversation going and together build a world where faith lifts every heart. Let's keep this conversation going, y'all. And together we can build a world where faith lifts every heart. I'm your host, Jermaine Thomas of My Irreligious Life. And until next time, deconstruct and question everything. God bless and happy Easter.